Neighbors in Cape Town could not figure out why two men were calmly walking a full-grown lion through their streets every single morning. And when the truth finally came out, nobody saw it coming. Stay with us because this story is one you will not want to miss. Every morning in Cape Town, two ordinary men walked a full-grown lion through their neighborhood like it was the most natural thing in the world. And for months, nobody could figure out how or why until the secret they had been quietly carrying finally came out and left an entire city speechless. Nobody who lived on the slopes of Signal Hill in Cape Town could quite agree when they first noticed it. Some said it was a Tuesday in early autumn. Others swore it was still summer because the mornings were warm enough to sit outside with coffee. But everyone who saw it remembered exactly where they were standing when a full-grown male lion came padding around the corner of a narrow residential street, calm as anything, with two men walking alongside him as though they were out with a very large, very golden dog. No leash, muzzle, or handler trailing behind with a tranquilizer gun. Just the lion and the two men, moving through the quiet streets in the pale morning light like they had been doing it for years. What many people did not notice was that Marco and Elon always chose the quietest routes, kept their walks at times when there were few people around, and carried emergency veterinary supplies just in case. They paid careful attention to Bram's mood and behavior each morning, and never took unnecessary risks, quietly following a set of safety steps to keep both their neighbors and Bram protected. Because they had. The two men were Marco de Villiers, a soft-spoken South African vet in his late 30s, and his childhood friend Elan Fortuin, who taught secondary school biology a few streets away from where they had both grown up. They were not famous. They were not connected to any wildlife organization or television crew. They were just two men from the neighborhood who happened to be walking a lion, and they seemed to find nothing unusual about it whatsoever. That, more than anything else, was what unsettled people. If they had looked nervous, if they had moved carefully around the animal the way any sane person might move around a creature that weighs over 200 kilograms and is built entirely for hunting, people might have understood it better. But Marco and Elon were relaxed. They talked to each other, pointed things out, and stopped to check their phones. The lion walked between them and slightly ahead, his huge head swinging gently from side to side, scanning the street with mild curiosity and absolutely no aggression. People started gathering at their windows every morning to watch. Joggers adjusted their routes just to cross paths with the trio, and then immediately crossed back to the other side of the road once they actually saw him up close. A woman who ran a small guest house on the upper road later said she started setting her alarm 15 minutes earlier just so she could have her tea ready by the time they came past. But the watching quickly turned into something more complicated than simple curiosity. Within a few weeks, the questions started. Who were these men? And where had this lion come from? Did they have permits? Was the animal even safe to be around? A few residents contacted local wildlife authorities. One neighbor filmed a short clip on his phone and posted it online, asking if anyone else had seen this and whether somebody should be doing something about it. The clip got 30,000 views in 2 days, and the comments were not kind. People who had never set foot in Cape Town were suddenly very confident about what Marco and Elon were doing wrong. Theories spread fast. Some said the lion had to be sedated. Others said the men must be connected to some kind of illegal exotic animal trade. A local newspaper picked up the story and ran it with a headline that asked more questions than it answered. And through all of it, Marco and Elon said almost nothing publicly, which of course only made things worse. What almost nobody knew was where the lion had actually come from. His name was Bram, and his story did not begin in any exotic pet market or private breeding facility. It began 3 years earlier on a game reserve about 2 hours outside the city, when Marco received an emergency call about a lioness who had rejected the smallest cub in her litter. By the time Marco arrived, the cub was in serious trouble. Severely underweight, not feeding, and burning through whatever energy reserves he had left. The reserve manager was already preparing himself for the worst. Marco stayed for 4 days without leaving. He fed the cub through a bottle every 2 hours, slept on the floor of the enclosure, and held the tiny animal against his chest through the cold nights to keep his temperature stable. On the morning of the 5th day, the cub fed on his own for the first time. The reserve manager told Marco to name his price for what he had done. Marco asked if he could take the cub home until he was strong enough to be reintroduced to the reserve. That had been 3 years ago. Bram had never gone back. And here is the part that surprised even people who thought they understood wildlife. It was not stubbornness or attachment that kept Bram with Marco, although both men had grown deeply fond of him. It was something more complicated than that. Lions raised entirely by humans from the first days of life undergo a process of behavioral imprinting that runs very deep. They do not learn to read other lions the way a wild-raised cub does. They do not understand the social signals, the boundaries, and the hierarchies that keep a pride functioning. Place a lion like that into an established pride without extensive rehabilitation, and the outcome is often fatal for the newcomer. Marco had tried twice to begin that rehabilitation process, working alongside a wildlife specialist. Both attempts had raised enough concerns that the specialist recommended pausing and reassessing before going further. So Bram stayed. And every morning, because a bored lion is a genuinely destructive lion, they walked him through the quiet streets before the neighborhood woke up. They had permits. In fact, the process to get legal approval for keeping and walking Bram had not been simple. Marco and Ellen spent months working with local authorities and wildlife organizations, submitting pages of paperwork, and undergoing regular property inspections before the city agreed to issue a special permit. They had documentation. They had a wildlife management plan on file with 2 separate authorities. What they did not have was any desire to explain all of that to strangers online, which was exactly what made the situation look so suspicious to everyone watching from the outside. It was Ilan who finally suggested they stop staying quiet. He put together a straightforward online post explaining who they were, how Bram had come into their lives, what the rehabilitation attempts had looked like, and why they had been paused, and what the long-term plan actually was. He kept it plain and honest, and did not try to make it more dramatic than it already was. The response was nothing like what either of them had prepared for. Within a week, wildlife vets from 3 other African countries had reached out with advice and offers of support. A rehabilitation specialist based in Zambia, who had spent over 20 years working specifically with humanized big cats, contacted Ilan directly and said she had been navigating exactly this kind of situation for most of her career, and that there were newer approaches worth exploring together. A small conservation non-profit offered funding toward a larger rehabilitation enclosure on a partner reserve that had already agreed in principle to work with them. And the neighbor who had posted the original clip, the one with the alarmed caption asking if someone should do something, issued a public apology that was more genuinely felt than most apologies you see online. He had not known. Most people did not know. And once they did, the tone of the whole conversation shifted. The secret that everyone had assumed was something to be ashamed of turned out to be something that had been quietly visible the whole time. 2 people doing a difficult and imperfect thing, trying to care for an animal they loved while working out how to eventually do right by him. Bram remains on the property outside Cape Town. The rehabilitation work with the Zambian specialist began earlier this year. It is slow and careful, and nobody is making promises about timelines. But every morning, the walks continue. Marco, Elan, and Bram moving through the quiet streets in the early light, the lion's golden head catching the first of the sun. Most of the neighbors wave now instead of reaching for their phones. Some secrets, it turns out, are not dark at all. They are just waiting for the right moment to be understood. If this story moved you, share it with someone who would appreciate it. Leave a comment below telling us what you would have thought if you had seen them coming around that corner. And subscribe so you do not miss the next one. We will see you there.